Hello, fellow reloaders. Professor P here. This is part 3 of our beginner's look at reloading the 38 Special. We were able to get up, do some tests, and we do have some results to share. And a couple of things, a couple of lessons learned. The first thing I always do is sort and organize my cases and take a good look at them and make sure that we are not seeing any pressure signs along the way. And if you look at that primer dent and the primer all looks good. Now, since the cases all look good, no case damage of any kind whatsoever, very confident that we're still below pressures and the velocities and everything will bear that out. We do have some targets to look at, so set those aside. One of the people that I'm mentoring right now said, "Are you sure you really want to show people the targets?" And I said, "Heck yes." Now, the reason I use these targets is I cannot see my shots from a moderate distance. So at 10 yards, I really don't see these very well. If I look real close, I might be able to, but when I'm focused on shooting and focused on center of target, I really don't see these very well at 10 yards. And maybe a younger person or somebody with better eyes will be able to see them. I can't. And I like that because I want to shoot at the center of the target without being influenced by where my other shots are going. I have a personal tendency to correct my shots. So if I'm shooting low and left, which you'll see here, I tend to correct that. You'll notice all of these. So W231, 4.3, 4, 5, and 6 grains. So be clear, 4.6 grains. And you'll see the group sizes up here. 4.6 had the smallest group size, but every shot, that's the hole punch, but every shot here, not a horrible sized group for a 2-inch barrel at 10 yards. Not great by any means, but not horrible. But every shot, far, far left and a little down. That's a grip problem. The question is, well, you're testing ammo, you shoot a lot, how can you be having a grip problem? Well, it's a really interesting thing that kind of came out of the exercise. None of these groups were really horrible. The only indicator I got was the faster group here at the 4.6 grains did have the best group. Kind of suggests that given the speeds that faster might be better, but it was a kind of a lessons learned on that day. Group size wasn't a huge deal. What is going on? Well, let's look at the revolver. This is the Rock Island 206 and the one I'm going to do all my testing with. So validated empty. I always want to validate empty and unloaded. There's a wall in front of me, so no people. When I did my first day of testing, I did take this up with the original wood grip on it, or faux wood, or whatever this is. And I didn't like this a huge amount. Now, I shot both accurately and decent precision. And there were two things I didn't really like about the grip. One, when I'm up on it, the hammer is digging right into right here above my thumb. So I wasn't really thrilled with that. My pinky's off the bottom. After the first day of shooting, I swapped out that for the other grip, put this on, and I never used it, I never tested it, and I just went out and did the ammo testing, having never tried this grip before. After I saw where my shot placement was, I knew immediately there was a grip problem on it. When I'm holding on to it, I have a significant gap. I don't have a good firm contact with my palm. So what's happening is as I shoot, the firearm is moving slowly to the left and migrating my shots down into the left. And I don't know that I had have spotted that so quickly if it hadn't been for the blind target. I am going to go back up when I do the next set of tests, put the faux wood grip back on, and we'll see if that proves. That said, that grip is very different. So here's one of my old Smiths. And this is not the round bottom, this is a square bottom Smith. And when I grip this, you'll notice two things. First, always empty, always empty. One, with the hammer back, it's above my hand, it's not digging in. That tells you something about the design, so that's good. And number two, when I am choked up properly, I got a pinky on all the way. That larger grip really helps. And if you look, I'm choked up onto the middle of that finger and I have really good contact with my palm all the way around. Grip is really important, needless to say. It explains why shots are left and a little low, but it really doesn't alter the grouping a whole lot. I do think that the gun was sliding. And why do I think that way? Why do I think that? So this is factory ammo. This shot more than one set of Agula. As I shot, I could see the progressions going. The last set of shots were all the way over left. Figure out that the gun was moving because my grip was poor. So did it open up my groups if I hadn't had a grip problem? Certainly. Important part of ammo testing is being really honest with yourself and making sure that you are including you or taking you out of the equation where necessary. That said, let's look at some data because we had 2 tests that we were running. One of those was the different load quantities, which we done. And these, of course, different head stamps. The only thing that was different was 6 of each of the different head stamps. And the data on that is pretty revealing. So let's look at some data. Now, keep in mind as we look at this data that we made a decision that we were going to follow the Hodgkins formulas. So that was the Winchester case, the Winchester primer. But what's really interesting is we popped in right along the Lyman line. Again, I do put the horizontal lines or factory ammo at that same grain weight. Other 2 manuals are listed here. See the Hornady manual versus the Hodgkin manual. We use the Hodgkins data almost exactly, and we're roughly 100, 150 feet per second off that line, but we are dead on the Lyman line, which really used different test conditions. So it is interesting that when you see this is not unusual. There are different test conditions that the different manual use, and that certainly explains part of it, but this is a significant jump. The 2-inch versus the 4-inch barrel that Hodgkins indicates that they use does not easily explain this significant difference. Regardless of that, this is the real data, and the data looks decent except for this one shot at the 4.4 charge level. What's interesting is driven by a single shot, and there's a way that we can see that in the data. Before I show how we see some variability, this data fills me with all of the confidence and maybe even 4 charges up from that level, get us up near the top of what Lyman says where we are in terms of the total velocity. Let's look at the data that's driving this 4.4 grain shot, and when we do that, I'm going to use a thing called a box and whisker diagram. These are fantastic for viewing data variability, a lot of statistical data at one time. Let's look right up here, and what you're seeing up at the top up here is a single shot is driving the entire test set at that grain level to be higher. Lots of explanations about how something like that can happen. When you see one shot, especially if you get groups 20, 30, 40, and you get one aberrant shot like that, sometimes it's helpful to pull that one shot out and relook at the statistical data. When you do that, you see that this group falls right in line with the others. So statistically, that one single data point, that one shot, is actually driving the entire data set to look a little bit funky. The other thing that we were looking at was data that we got from changing the case. So this is a specific charge weight held constant, all other parameters held constant, a group of 6 shots that determine the averages and the statistics around for each of the different kinds of cases. And we can tell a lot from this. So when I started this set with my group of new reloaders, I wanted everybody to try to use the same cases. And this question came up of, well, how much does case really matter? You know, if I'm going to mix and match cases in my group, does it matter? Number one. And number two, if you're using one case set and I'm using a different case set, does it matter? Well, the short answer is yeah, case really matters. It matters a lot. And an example you'll see here is how big of both the extreme spread these Winchester cases have. And I use Winchester cases in a lot of places, so it's no dig on them, but do notice here how tight the Starline was compared to the Winchester. Despite that, their averages are very, very close to each other. And notice how everything else has an average a little bit higher. What is interesting is the Lyman manual used Federal cases, which in our test here had a higher velocity, and yet we're using the Winchester cases and we're showing the lower velocity. We can also tell something else about the cases. This is a very, very good example of where case volumes are notably different. The velocity, which is our best and poor as it is measure of pressure, tells us that those cases had to have higher pressure to get that much more velocity out of them. And in this case, that gap is from down here near 680 all the way up to near 760, almost 100 foot per second difference. And the reality is that 100 feet per second will change your shot placement. And just consider the risk you run if you were loading Winchester cases and you were getting this kind of measure and you begin to push the end of the envelope of the pressure and volume of powder you can load, and then you switch without thinking about it over to a CBC case, you could create a significant pressure problem. And what's really scary in something like a 38 special is a lot of load data goes clear up into 38 plus P without real good visual indicators in the manuals about it. And when that happens, if you're starting to really load on the fine end of what goes from a special to a plus P, you could actually injure a firearm yourself. Cases do matter, and they matter a lot, and it's important that you take them into consideration. All right, to close out part 3 here, now that we've looked at the data, we can make some guesses about where we want to be. I do want to go, again, best practice, by those tenths of grain increments, and we'll run up to there. And I think we'll go ahead and load that 4th increment. And this one begins to get a little bit questionable. We're getting up near what would probably be a max load. We will be looking very closely at the cases, at the ranges when we run the 3rd set, and let's just see how far up we go. The other thing that I noticed here, and notice these things sometimes on a printout that I don't see on a screen, is that we are very quickly approaching that 800-foot level that gets us up not quite to where our factory was. In fact, if we stay on this Lyman line and we don't have an acceleration, it's a pretty good bet that W231 with that projectile will never be able to get as fast as our other our factory ammo examples. And that's something to consider, that this may just not be the right powder for that projectile to get us where we want to be in terms of up in the 850-ish range. Okay, we got a plan. Let's load some ammo up, and we'll see you in part 4.